It's time for Business Blueprints, from pixels to patterns. This is where we break down the journey of tomorrow's titans.
Hmm.
Welcome, everyone, to a deep dive where we're unpacking insights from, well, a whole stack of sources. We've got recent conversations, some great analyses from leading voices in business, finance, and tech. We've pulled from people like Alex Hormozy, the My First Million crew, Robert Breedlove, the Y Combinator team. A really interesting mix, and these aren't just, random takes. They offer a genuinely diverse look at what's driving success right now, how people are finding opportunities, and frankly, navigating some pretty complex landscapes.
Absolutely. And what's really fascinating here is seeing how these different perspectives connect. You've got fundamental business math over here, then revolutionary ideas about money from someone like Breedlove, plus like really practical strategies for personal growth and actually scaling companies.
Right. You might think, okay, Hormozy talking gym economics.
Yeah.
How does that relate to Breedlove on Bitcoin as a mission? Or the My First Million guys dissecting the BBL market?
Exactly. But there are these threads, these underlying principles running through all of them. It's about value, leverage, finding unmet needs, understanding systems.
And that's really the mission for us today in this deep dive. We want to pull out the most valuable nuggets from these conversations, these expert sources.
Yeah.
Connect those dots between what might seem like totally separate ideas and basically give you a shortcut to understanding what really matters from all this stuff. So we'll look at, foundational economics, explore some surprising market opportunities, really surprising ones. We'll delve into the power of a mission-driven movement and then uncover some concrete, actionable strategies for building and scaling today. Let's unpack this.
Okay, sounds good. Let's start with that bedrock you mentioned. Because look, if you're building any kind of business, doesn't matter if you're scaling big or just trying to get something off the ground from scratch. Understanding the core economics, it's just not optional. It's totally foundational.
Yeah, you can't skip it.
You really can. And one concept that Alex Hormozy, drawing from his own experience building businesses like his gyms, just hammers on. He says it basically unlocked his entire career. It's the LTV to CAC ratio.
Okay, LTV to CAC, lifetime value to customer acquisition cost. For someone who might, know the acronym, but maybe not the day-to-day practical side of it, Hormozy makes it sound almost ridiculously simple. He calls it third-grade math. Can you break down what those two numbers actually represent?
He's totally spot on. The math itself is surprisingly simple. So LTV first. That stands for lifetime gross profit. Sometimes people call it LTV, sometimes customer lifetime value, or CLV. Same idea. It's the total amount of profit you expect to make from a single customer over their entire relationship with you. But crucially, it's after you subtract the direct costs of delivering your product or service to them.
Got it. So like if I sell sandwiches, it's the total revenue from a customer minus the cost of the bread, the meat, the packaging for all the sandwiches they ever buy.
Exactly. Or if it's a service. Say you run a subscription box for $100 a month, and the stuff in the box plus shipping costs you $20 per box. Your gross profit each month is $80. If your average customer stays subscribed for, say, 10 months, their LTV is $80 times 10 months, so $800. That's the total gross profit they bring in.
Okay, $800. That's the cash that actually flows from that relationship before you count what it costs to get them right.
Precisely, before the acquisition cost. And that acquisition cost is the second number, CAC, customer acquisition cost. This is simply the total amount you spend on everything that directly brings in a new customer. Think marketing spend, your ad budget, maybe content creation efforts if they're focused on lead gen, sales commissions if you have a team. You take all those costs over a period and divide by the number of new customers you got in that same period.
So, simple example.
Yeah.
Spent $10,000 last month on Facebook ads and maybe some sales calls. Got 100 new customers. My CAC is $100.
Exactly. $100 per customer. And the back of the napkin ways Hormozy suggests to calculate this, they really are simple. For PAC, look at your total marketing and sales costs for a whole year. Divide by the total new customers that year. Boom, average CAC.
Okay.
For LTV, a quick way is total revenue for the year divided by your total number of active customers. That gives you average revenue per customer. Then multiply that by your average gross profit percentage, which you can estimate as total revenue, total cost of goods sold, total revenue.
Right. Or he mentioned another way for the profit part.
Yeah, you could figure out the total cost of delivery or cost of goods sold, COGS, for the year, divide that by total customers to get average cost per customer, then subtract that number from the average lifetime revenue per customer. The point is, you don't need like some super complex accounting setup to get a working estimate of these numbers. It's basic math.
And the absolute core principle, the thing Hormozy really drives home, is that number one, LTD, has to be bigger than number two, CAC.
Absolutely must. You got to make more from them than you paid to get them. Obvious, maybe, but
But the implications of that ratio are huge, right? That's where the simple math turns into a massive strategic advantage.
exactly. Especially when things get competitive. Hormozy paints this picture of the marketplace, particularly online with ads, as basically being an auction of attention. Every business is bidding, trying to grab a potential customer's eyeballs and clicks.
And the business with the better LTV.CID ratio effectively wins that auction.
That's the core idea. Because the business that can afford to spend more to acquire a customer, they ultimately win. Why? Because they know they'll make significantly more profit from that customer over their lifetime compared to their competitors using the same ad platform. If you know you're going to make, say, $800 in gross profit from acquiring someone through Google Ads, and your competitor, selling something similar but maybe with worse margins or retention, only makes $200 profit from that same channel, well, you can comfortably bid, let's say, $150 to get that customer, your competitor. They might only be able to bid $100 before they start losing money on every new customer. You can outbid them all day long.
This is where his gym business model comparison comes in. It makes it crystal clear.
Oh yeah, it's a classic. He contrasts the standard industry approach he saw back then with the model that made him successful. So the typical gym offer might be like $21 for a 21-day trial, something really low barrier. The hope is, you convert maybe a third of those trials into a regular membership, say $99 a month.
Okay, sounds reasonable.
But look at the cash flow in the critical first 30 days. The gym only collects that initial $21. Now let's say there's SAC. The cost to get that person through the door via ads was $100, which is plausible. So in that first month, the business is instantly down $79 for every new customer. They're burning cash up front.
Ouch.
Yeah, they're totally reliant on those people sticking around for like 6, 7, 8 months just to break even on the acquisition cost, let alone make a profit. This puts a really hard cap on their marketing budget, right? They can only afford to lose so much upfront cash each month.
Right, it limits how fast they can grow. But his model, it flipped that completely.
Totally flipped the cash flow. Instead of that low $21 trial, they offered a 6-week challenge, maybe for $600, paid upfront, and then, boom, immediately layered on upsells like, hey, want supplements to help with the challenge? That's $200. Or want to lock in a great rate for a full year membership after the challenge? Prepay now for $2,000.
So getting much more commitment and cash up front.
Way more. The blended average amount they collected from a new customer within the first 30 days wasn't $21. It was closer to $1,000. Now, let's say their CAC was still $100. Think about that. You put $100 into ads, and you get $1,000 back almost immediately.
Wow. That's a 10.1 return right out of the gate. That fundamentally changes the game.
It changes everything about how you approach growth, because when you have a model that's spitting back 10 times your acquisition costs in the first month, your marketing budget isn't limited by how much cash do we have in the bank or how much can we afford to lose this month. Your budget becomes spend as many dollars as humanly possible as long as we maintain this amazing 10.1 ratio.
Because every dollar you spend is generating $9 in profit almost instantly.
Right. This lets you just pour fuel on the fire. You can scale your ad spend incredibly aggressively, potentially to the point where you are literally buying up almost all the available advertising inventory, all the attention in your local market. Your competitors just can't compete on bids. Hormozy calls this ability to dominate the acquisition channels a kind of legal monopoly over attention. You're not doing anything illegal. You're not undercutting prices unfairly. You're winning purely because your underlying unit economics are vastly superior.
He even shared that incredible story about using this cash flow to open new gym locations, right?
Yeah, it perfectly illustrates the power of this upfront cash flow. He described starting with maybe just $5,000 in the bank. He'd go sign a lease for a new gym location, then immediately start spending heavily on ads, say $500 a day, promoting that upfront challenge offer. He knew, based on his tested model, that this ad spend would generate something like $100,000 in sales within that first month from people signing up. And this cash came in before the gym was even fully built out.
That's wild.
It is. That $100K generated from initial customer acquisition was enough to completely finance the entire gym build-out, buying all the equipment, doing the flooring, the signs, the paint, everything. He used this exact method, he said, to finance opening 6 gym locations when he was just in his early 20s, all self-funded from the cash flow of acquiring customers before they even started working out.
That kind of rapid self-funded expansion, it's only possible if your acquisition model is generating cash immediately, not burning it.
That's the power of mastering that ratio and, crucially, the payback period. Getting your money back fast allows reinvestment and scale.
Okay, so that 10.1 ratio is amazing, obviously. But Hormozy also digs into what a minimum required LTV/CAC ratio should be. And it's not always the standard 3.1 you hear about, right?
Yeah, he challenges that common Silicon Valley rule of thumb, the 3.1 ratio, meaning you make $3 for every $1 you spend acquiring a customer. He argues that 3.1 is probably only viable if your business is highly, highly automated.
Automated. What does he mean by that exactly? Like software.
He breaks a business down into three core operational parts. 1, lead generation, how you get potential customers interested. 2, conversion, how you actually sell to them. 3, delivery, how you provide the product or service. Automated here means using high-leverage, one-to-many activities that don't need a lot of direct human effort per customer. So think running ads, viral content, automated email funnels for leads, automated checkout flows for sales, software as the delivery mechanism, a standardized system with minimal human touch per sale.
Okay, and manual is the opposite, lots of people involved.
Exactly. Manual means people are heavily involved at that step, like manual prospecting or outreach for leads, a human sales team closing deals over the phone, human customer service reps handling delivery or support, custom fulfillment.
Got it. So the more humans touching each transaction, the more manual it is.
Correct. And based on how many of those three components, lead gen, conversion, delivery, are manual, he proposes very different minimum required LTV/SAC ratios. If all three are highly automated, like, say, selling software via ads to an online checkout, then maybe a 3.1 ratio works, though he'd still push for higher. If two parts are automated but one is manual, maybe automated lead gen and sales, but you have human coaches delivering the service, you probably need at least 6.1. If only one part is automated and two are manual, like ads for leads, but then phone sales and manual service delivery, you're likely looking at needing a 9.1 ratio. And if all three components are heavily manual, think cold calling, face-to-face sales, bespoke consulting delivered by people, you need a 12.1 ratio or maybe even significantly more just to survive and have a chance to scale.
Wow, 12.1 or more. That's a huge jump from 3.1.
Oh.
Why does needing more people in the process demand such a drastically higher return on every customer acquired?
It boils down to the costs and inefficiencies that come with scaling, especially when scaling processes that rely on humans. First off, Seek itself usually doesn't stay flat. It tends to creep up over time as you grow.
Why is that?
Well, you have to start advertising to colder audiences, people less familiar with you. More competitors usually enter the market, bidding up ad costs, your CPMs, the cost per thousand impressions tend to rise. Hormozy basically says your CAC today is probably the best, the lowest it will ever be. It generally only gets harder and more expensive to find the next customer as you saturate the easy-to-reach parts of the market.
Okay, so acquisition just inherently gets more expensive as you scale. Makes sense.
Then, on top of that, as the business grows, you inevitably add layers. Management layers, administrative overhead, HR, finance, more office space. All these infrastructure costs add up and eat into overall profitability, even if they aren't directly tied to delivering the service. Plus, the customers you acquire later might be, less bought in or a slightly worse fit than your early adopters, potentially making them less valuable over their lifetime lower LTV.
And the manual processes. Scaling those add another layer of cost and delay.
This is the really critical piece for needing those higher ratios. If your sales process or your service delivery relies heavily on people, scaling means hiring lots of new people, sales reps, service agents, maybe marketers doing manual outreach. Now, these new hires, even if they're talented, they're usually less experienced or less efficient than your core team initially. They need training, they need time to ramp up. But here's the kicker. You start paying their salaries immediately, day one. The revenue or the efficiency gains they eventually bring, that often lags by weeks, sometimes months.
So if your LTV/CAC ratio is already thin, like 3.1,
Right.
and you suddenly have to hire, say, 10 new salespeople to handle growth, you've got 10 new salaries hitting your books right away, but the extra revenue they generate might not show up for 60 days. That could crush your cash flow.
Precisely. That immediate cost increase, combined with a delayed return, can instantly make your previously profitable acquisition efforts unprofitable. You could run out of cash fast. So those much higher required ratios, the 6.1, 9.1, 12.1, they provide the essential cash flow buffer. They generate enough profit from each customer quickly enough to absorb those rising CACs, the general overhead of scaling, and specifically the upfront costs and temporary inefficiencies of bringing on new manual labor without going broke. Rule number 1, as Hormozy says, is stay in business. And that requires cash. This padding ensures you have it.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. The buffer is crucial for scaling anything with significant human involvement. So the ratio is fundamental. The target depends on your model. How do you actually improve the ratio? What levers can you pull?
Right, so the strategies basically fall into two main camps, but you always have to remember the goal. Maximize the ratio itself, LTV divided by CAC. It's not just about making LTV as high as possible or just making CAC as low as possible in isolation.
Got it. So camp one, increasing LTV.
Yeah, making each customer worth more profit over their lifetime. How? You can improve your core offer, make the product or service genuinely better, more valuable. You can add relevant upsells or cross-sells, things people need or want after the initial purchase. You can focus on improving customer retention rates so people stick around longer and buy more often. And sometimes you can simply increase your price if the value you deliver justifies it.
Makes sense. Make the customer relationship more profitable. And camp two, decreasing CAC.
This is about making your customer acquisition efforts more efficient, getting more customers for the same or less spend, so you can. Make your initial offer more compelling, more irresistible. That improves conversion rates all the way down the funnel. Systematically improve your advertising creatives. Hormozy stresses testing a higher volume of new ads, focusing relentlessly on creating better hooks to grab attention, and constantly remaking your winning ads to avoid fatigue. You can optimize your landing pages and sales funnels through CRO, conversion rate optimization. Basically, testing changes to make it easier for people to understand the value and click the button or fill out the form. Improve your follow-up sequences if people don't buy immediately. Refine your sales scripts, invest in sales team training, or maybe target cheaper advertising channels or audiences. But there's a caution there.
Right. You mentioned the source cautions that cheaper audiences might lead to lower LTV.
Exactly. This is a really critical point Hormozy makes. He says most business owners fall into the trap of optimizing for the wrong metric. They obsess over getting the cheapest possible lead or the cheapest possible customer.
Instead of the most profitable customer relative to cost.
Precisely. He uses this great example. Would you rather have a business with a $5,000 LTV and a $500 SAC, or one with a $1,000 LTV and a $200 SAC? Now, if you only look at CAC, the second business looks better, right? $200 CAC is way cheaper than $500 SAC.
Yeah, seems like a no-brainer initially.
But then you look at the ratio. Business one, $5,000 LTV divided by $500 SAC. That's a 10.1 return. Business two, $1,000 LTV divided by $200 SAC. That's only a 5.1 return. Which business would you rather own? You'd much rather put $500 in and get $5,000 back than put $200 in and only get $1,000 back.
Right. The leverage on your acquisition spend is way higher in the first business, even though the absolute cost per customer is higher.
That's the key insight. The business with the superior ratio has better fundamental unit economics. They can afford to spend more, acquire more customers, dominate attention, and reinvest profits much faster. It shifts your whole focus from just penny pinching on acquisition costs to maximizing the profitable return on every single dollar you spend to get a customer. Understanding this, managing this LTV/CAC ratio actively, and paying attention to the payback period, that's presented as the absolute core lever dictating how fast and successfully you can grow. This, Hormozy says, is how real business works. It's not just about a cool idea, it's mastering the math of acquisition and value.
Makes sense. Drop a like and share if you find this valuable, especially if thinking about your own LTV, because sparking some ideas. Okay, so mastering that economic engine is crucial, but where do you find the opportunities to build such a business? Where do these high LTV possibilities exist? Shifting gears a bit, some of the sources we looked at, especially the My First Million podcast, are brilliant at uncovering opportunities in places you might totally overlook, often in markets that seem, well, kind of boring or maybe even weird.
Oh, absolutely. Sean Curry and Sam Parr, they have a real knack for this. And what their explorations consistently demonstrate is that, massive fortunes aren't just being built in Silicon Valley or with flashy tech. Huge amounts of wealth are being generated in seemingly mundane, everyday categories. It comes down to finding unmet needs or taking an existing, maybe clunky product and giving it a dramatic 10x improvement, or spotting lucrative adjacent opportunities around really big, growing trends.
They had some fun examples of boring products ripe for a makeover.
Totally. Like fire logs. Duraflame is the big name. It's huge. But is there space for a new brand? Maybe something more premium, better performing, maybe smells nicer or looks cooler. They threw out a hypothetical Flint brand. They even questioned the distribution. Why are fire logs mostly sold at Home Depot? What about convenience stores? Huge potential there for impulse buys on the way to a weekend getaway.
Or karaoke machines. That one surprised me.
Right. Most people's experience is they're awkward, ugly, hard to set up, a pain to rent or buy. That just screams opportunity for someone to come along and design a beautiful, user-friendly, maybe subscription-based karaoke product. Same idea with tools. Most tools are just functional, right? But could there be a market for really well-designed, aesthetically pleasing tools? They joked about creating the Touchland version of tools, referencing that company that made hand sanitizer cool. It shows even established categories can be disrupted with better design and branding.
But the area they really dove into, which was definitely unexpected, was what they called the guts and butts industry.
Just tuckless.
Yeah, definitely catches your attention.
Yeah.
But the market sizes involved are absolutely serious. They highlighted the Brazilian butt lift, the BBL. Apparently, it's been the fastest growing cosmetic surgery over the last decade. Like 800% growth. That's insane. And it's not niche. People are spending nearly $1 billion a year on BBLs just in America. They talked about the procedure fat transfer, basically, and mentioned the inventor, some guy named Evo, who sounded like quite a character, a legend in medicine, even carried the Olympic torch, apparently, and how it got popular after safety improved.
But the real business angle wasn't just the surgery itself, it was the stuff around it, right? Exactly. This is classic opportunity spotting, finding auxiliary businesses. If $1 billion is being spent on the procedure, the crucial question is, then what? What happens after the surgery? Well, everyone needs recovery care. They need specialized products. So, boom, opportunities pop up. BBL recovery centers like dedicated post-op care facilities, and specific products like special recovery pillows designed so patients can sit down without putting pressure on the area. They even showed an example of one brand. It's about serving the needs created by the main trend.
And they applied this same trend surfing logic to another massive thing happening now, Ozempic and similar weight loss drugs.
Perfect example. Find the complementary products and services needed by the millions using these drugs. They mentioned Shotzi and act specifically for tracking your injections. Apparently, it became a multi-million-dollar subscription SaaS business just from that simple need. They also brainstormed ideas like drinks or supplements marketed as Ozempic Plus Plus, maybe to help manage side effects, or perhaps claim to enhance the benefits. This led to some funny banter about, the human tendency to look for external fixes, joking that everybody wants to have a thyroid issue rather than just changing diet or habits. It's worth noting, too, the source mentioned the hosts acknowledging different views on Ozempic itself. Some see it as a miracle, others worry it's dangerous, and they personally preferred solving problems without drugs if possible. But regardless of those opinions, the business opportunity comes from serving the massive existing user base.
The gut health area was another one they flagged as huge and growing.
Definitely. Med spas are already doing big business with procedures that touch on wellness. They predicted we might see the rise of dedicated gut spas places focused specifically on helping people with digestion, GI issues, overall gut health, going beyond just looking good. And related to that, the market for colon cancer screening is enormous, multi-billion dollars. They pointed to Exact Sciences and their Cologuard test, that non-invasive mail-in test. It did $2.76 billion in revenue last year. And they noted, this isn't some small startup. Cologuard is backed by private equity. That tells you sophisticated investors see the massive scale and recurring revenue potential here.
Hearing these examples, BBL pillows, Ozempic apps, Cologuard, even better fire logs, it really hammers home their point that opportunity is just everywhere.
It completely demolishes the idea that you need to invent the next iPhone or that all the good ideas are taken. These diverse guts and butts businesses, plus the other examples, represent literally billions and billions in sales just from the things they discussed in, like one deep dive. Their core takeaway is pretty blunt. There is absolutely no excuse for not being able to figure out some way to build a successful business, given the sheer volume of unmet needs and adjacent opportunities out there.
And a practical way to find these, they suggest, is basically to reverse engineer what's already working.
Yeah, look at successful people, successful companies. What are they doing well? What trends are they writing? And then, crucially, ask that then what question. What problems are created by their success? What needs arise after someone buys their product or adopts the trend they represent? The gaps, the complementary services, the auxiliary products, they're often hiding in plain sight right there.
Definitely food for thought. Subscribe to the Snippet Labs YouTube channel, folks, for more deep dives like this one.
And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Snippet Labs for more updates and cool insights we find.
Okay, so we've gone from core business math to spotting opportunities in unexpected places. Now let's shift again to something quite different. The incredible power of a movement driven by a really strong core belief system. Robert Breedlove's discussions, especially the one we looked at with Eric V. Stacks, took us deep into the world of Bitcoin, but framed very much as the orange pill mission.
Right, and this conversation is less about, LTV and CAC and much more about a fundamental shift in perspective, how you see the world, especially when it comes to money and economics. The orange pill term itself is deliberate, right? It's a play on the matrix. Red pill shows you reality, blue pill keeps you ignorant but comfortable. The orange pill in this context represents that aha moment, the realization about how central banking works, the nature of government-controlled fiat currency, and what they argue are the consequences, a state of late-stage capitalism distorted by monetary policy and inflation.
So the mission then is essentially to spread that realization, to orange pill the world.
That's exactly the framing. It's about helping others understand the current monetary system as they see it and discover Bitcoin as a potential alternative, something with a fixed supply, outside government control. And the source really emphasizes that for many people who go down this path, this understanding isn't just an intellectual exercise. It often triggers significant positive personal transformations.
Like the Neo comparison, suddenly seeing the underlying code of the economy.
They definitely use that kind of language. They talk about gaining clarity by looking at economics through the lens of a sound money like Bitcoin, contrasting what they see as the logical consistency of Austrian economic theory, which tends to emphasize free markets and sound money, with what they describe as a confusion and, frankly, manipulation inherent in Keynesian economic pseudoscience, which favors government intervention and monetary management. That's how they frame it in the source. And this new perspective, this clarity, can bring a real sense of empowerment, a sense of purpose. Eric specifically mentioned how it totally reframed his life goals.
Oh, really? How so?
He talked about shifting from thinking, how can I use my life to stack more Bitcoin, to how can I use Bitcoin to get more out of my life? That's a big shift. It involves, he said, leaning more into intuition, overcoming those deep-seated fears and the scarcity mindset that they argue is imposed by our current volatile money system. And it's about transmuting negative energy, like just being angry about the system, yelling at clown world as they put it into positive, productive action centered around this Bitcoin mission.
And it sounds like this mission is powerful enough to push them to do things that are personally uncomfortable.
That was a really interesting point of connection between them. Robert Breedlove mentioned he's naturally quite introverted, values his privacy immensely, yet he's chosen to become a very public figure in the Bitcoin space, purely for the sake of the mission. Similarly, Eric talked about overcoming his own discomfort, like being on camera, talking publicly. They see this willingness to be vulnerable, to share their own journeys. They see it creating a ripple effect. It inspires others who might be curious but intimidated. Sharing their path gives others permission, as they said, to go and do the same thing. It helps build this army of orange pilling people.
Okay, but if the goal is to orange pill the world, how do you actually get these complex, sometimes pretty countercultural ideas out to a broader audience, beyond the people who are already deep into Bitcoin?
Yeah, that led to a fascinating discussion about content strategy, specifically needing to move beyond formats that only appeal to the existing, highly knowledgeable niche. They acknowledged that their really dense, long-form stuff, 3-hour podcasts, deep dives into complex economic history or technical series, is super valuable for the intelligent Bitcoin maxes, the core audience.
But it's not necessarily bringing new people in easily.
Exactly. So they're consciously adopting what they call a barbell strategy for content. Keep the deep, heavy, esoteric stuff on one end for the dedicated base, but then build out the other end of the barbell with lots of new, more palatable, shorter form, highly shareable digital media. This requires mastering what they call the art of translating, taking these complex ideas and finding ways to make them emotionally resonant, maybe funny, or just accessible and intriguing for someone encountering them for the first time.
What kind of new formats are they exploring for that?
Things like weekly shows that discuss current events, but specifically through a positive Bitcoin lens, trying hard not to just fall into negativity or, again, yelling at clown world. Also creating response content, reacting to statements from public figures, like maybe Jamie Dimon says something about crypto and they analyze it, perhaps suggesting it might be intentional FUD, fear, uncertainty, doubt. Short-form documentaries are another idea, and critically sharing those personal journeys, like Eric's story, to show the human side, the transformation.
And sharing the journey is key, because understanding Bitcoin conceptually is one step, but the mission seems to involve practical actions too, like actually taking control of your own keys, self-custody.
Huge theme. They really highlighted Eric's journey with self-custody as being super relatable and inspiring, especially for people who don't think of themselves as tech people.
Hmm.
His path from, not being particularly tech savvy to successfully setting up things like multi-signature wallets, which add security, learning to use the Lightning Network for cheap, fast payments, even running his own Bitcoin node. It shows that these steps, while they might seem daunting, are absolutely achievable for regular people.
And they talked about different levels of being orange-pilled.
Yeah, kind of humorously, like just owning some Bitcoin is maybe level one, then progressing to self-custody, actually holding your own private keys, not leaving your coins on an exchange where they could be frozen or lost. That's the core principle.
Oh.
Not your keys, not your Bitcoin. And then they joked about eventually becoming orange pilled, maybe moving towards a more hardcore, paranoid, tinfoil hat-wearing crypto anarchist perspective. But the serious point is showing people the practical how to move along that path towards greater financial sovereignty and make it seem less intimidating.
Which includes recommending tools that make it easier.
Yeah.
Right? Like that hardware wallet they mentioned.
Absolutely. Making self-custody less scary and more user-friendly is crucial for broader adoption. They specifically called out the iCoin technology hardware wallet as a good example. It's designed precisely for that, making secure self-custody accessible. The source described it looking kind of like a mini smartphone touchscreen camera, but the key security feature is that it's completely air-gapped. No Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth, no cellular, no GPS. It can't connect directly to the internet. It communicates transaction data by scanning QR codes displayed on your computer or phone screen using its camera. They mention it has a simple interface and, uniquely, an optional built-in thermal printer. During setup, it can physically print out a QR code backup of your private key, which they said makes the backup and potential recovery process much faster and simpler than fiddling with seed words for some people. The overall point being, devices like this are essential infrastructure for enabling true Bitcoin ownership, which, in their view, only happens when you control your own keys.
So the mission really connects the big philosophical ideas to very practical tools and steps for individual empowerment.
Exactly. And they believe the positive impact ripples outwards. Breedlove speculated that Bitcoin might even offer small benefits to non-holders, maybe by reducing demand pressure on assets like real estate if Bitcoiners prefer digital scarcity.
And they painted this picture of the Bitcoin community as almost a kind of parallel universe.
Yeah, contrasting trends they perceive in the mainstream fiat world, things like centralization, maybe a loss of meaning, declining birth rates with what they see happening in the Bitcoin subculture. They observe more entrepreneurial activity, people starting families, finding a strong sense of purpose aligned with the mission. They even propose that Bitcoin could fundamentally change human interaction, shifting it from what they see as often parasitic dynamics under the current system towards more symbiotic relationships, ultimately bringing humanity into greater coherence. This big vision, this feeling of contributing to something genuinely good for human flourishing by orange-pilling others, by challenging the status quo that's presented as the powerful intrinsic motivation behind the mission, it makes the whole endeavor feel valuable beyond just personal gain, and that makes it contagious.
Really interesting perspective. Drop a like and share if you find this valuable, especially if you're exploring Bitcoin or the ideas around financial sovereignty. Okay, so we've journeyed from fundamental business math and spotting weird opportunities all the way to the transformative power of a deeply held mission. Now let's try and tie some of this back together, looking at the practical realities of building enduring businesses and really mastering the ongoing process of growth. We can draw insights here from Shopify's story, some lessons from building an AI product like Cursor, and more tactical advice from Alex Hormozy.
Yeah, starting with Shopify. That interview with Harley Finkelstein, their president, on My First Million was packed with gems about building at massive scale. One really significant theme was the almost unbelievable importance of founder obsession. Harley compared Toby Lutke, Shopify's founder, whose entire world seems to revolve around Shopify, with someone like Patrick Collison at Stripe, who clearly has broader intellectual interests and projects. Harley's take is that this deep, unwavering, almost all-consuming give-a-shit factor from the founder. It's an incredibly potent, maybe even irreplaceable force driving a company's long-term success.
It's like the company becomes their life's work, their main creative output.
It really seems that way with Toby, and Shopify's mission reflects that focus. It's simple, powerful. Increase the amount of entrepreneurs on the planet. Harley pointed out how this mission isn't just words on a wall. It acts as a really strong filter in hiring. They attract people, like himself and Toby, whose own lives were fundamentally changed by entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
It creates this deep alignment.
And Toby's leadership style itself sounds quite unique.
Very. Harley highlighted a few key things. First, Toby has this deep technical intuition. He's not just a business guy. He's apparently constantly reading the latest AI research papers, deeply understands the Shopify codebase. This technical depth allows him to set company priorities with incredible clarity. Harley mentioned Toby sends out this annual email setting the direction, driven more by this deep intuition and vision than by, say, customer surveys or standard planning cycles. He also apparently has this uncanny ability to spot hidden talent, to look past org charts and titles and identify people making a huge impact, maybe by looking at their GitHub code contributions,
Yeah.
and then give them massive responsibility and let them run.
Seeing potential where others might just see a job title.
Exactly. And Harley said Toby constantly pushes people to find a new gear, to realize potential they didn't know they had. This includes this expectation that basically everyone at Shopify, Toby included, has to sort of requalify for their job every single year, constantly learning, adapting, proving their value in a fast-moving world. Harley also mentioned understanding personalities helps. He noted Toby is an Enneagram 8, the challenger, very direct, tough, focused on the best result, maybe not always prioritizing politeness. Won't say 20 words when 2 will do, was the quote. Harley himself is a 3, the achiever. Knowing this dynamic means, while it might not always feel super collegial in the traditional sense, working there is incredibly meaningful because it forces growth.
And strategically, they made some really deliberate choices early on to protect that long-term vision, didn't they?
Absolutely. Harley said they made a conscious decision not to return calls from corporate development teams at bigger tech companies back in the early days. They simply didn't want the distraction or the temptation of an acquisition offer derailing their focus. Their goal was always to build a 100-year independent company. Going public relatively early was part of that strategy too, seen as the best path to ensure long-term independence and control.
And the impact of that focus is just undeniable when you look at Shopify's scale today.
It's staggering. They fundamentally democratized e-commerce, made it possible for the long tail millions of small businesses, individual creators to build real, scalable online stores affordably. The vast majority of the trillion-plus dollars that have flowed through Shopify hasn't been from huge corporations. It's been from those small entrepreneurs. Harley shared that great personal story from his law school days, setting up a simple Shopify store selling t-shirts, then hearing the cha-ching notification on his phone from sales coming in from Ireland overnight. It just clicked for him the power of combining individual ambition with truly enabling technology. Now, shifting slightly but still on building products, the Y Combinator source had some interesting points from the CEO of Cursor, that AI-powered code editor, specifically about focusing on the right metrics when you're building a tool for professionals, like developers using AI.
Right, avoiding those vanity metrics that don't really tell you if the product is valuable.
Exactly. Instead of just tracking total daily active users or monthly active users, which might include lots of people just trying it out once they focused laser-like on paid-powered users, these were the developers actually using the AI features heavily, like 4 or 5 days every week. That metric was a much stronger signal of true product-market fit and sustainable value, especially since providing AI features actually costs real money. Their development process also leaned heavily on dogfooding the team, using Cursor constantly for their own coding, and they prioritized building demos that were immediately useful for the team itself, improving their own workflow, rather than just optimizing for flashy demos that looked good externally but might not be robust or practical. They called those flashy but fragile demos the siren songs involved in building AI products.
That's a great insight. Don't just build for the demo, build for the actual user's workflow.
Yeah, it emphasizes really dialing in the core experience for your target user. Speed, reliability, the actual intelligence of the AI, and how smoothly it integrates.
Okay, let's bring Alex Hormozy back into the picture. We talked about his LTV.csec framework, but he also had some really practical advice on managing the process of improvement and growth, specifically around handling new ideas.
Right. He offers this strong counterpoint to the common entrepreneurial urge to constantly tinker and change things. He argues that always trying to do more, implementing every new idea that pops into your head can actually make you less money. Why? Because of the hidden cost of change. Every new initiative you launch, every process you tweak, it's like, in his analogy, detonating a bomb within your existing systems. The ripple effects are often unpredictable, and a change intended to improve one thing can easily break something else or make another area worse.
So how do you balance the need to innovate and improve with this inherent cost and risk of change?
He uses a really disciplined system for managing ideas. He keeps what he calls Alex's big list of ideas on his phone. When a new idea strikes him, a potential improvement, a new marketing tactic, whatever, he writes it down immediately. But, and this is the crucial part, he doesn't tell his team about it right away. He doesn't act on it. He lets the idea season for like 2 to 4 weeks. Only if, after that waiting period, he's still thinking about the idea constantly, and it still seems like it has a really high potential value and a decent chance of actually working. Only then will he even consider bringing it up and potentially pursuing it.
That forces a real filter on ideas. It has to survive that initial excitement phase.
Exactly. It requires selectivity. It means accepting, as he puts it, that some shit stays fucked for a while. You can't fix everything at once. The potential benefit of the new idea has to clearly outweigh the guaranteed cost and disruption of implementing the change. It has to be truly worth it before you detonate that bomb.
That's some serious discipline,
Yeah.
especially when you're wired to constantly look for improvements.
It really is. It stops you from chasing every shiny object and helps focus energy on the changes most likely to move the needle significantly without causing chaos. And this whole idea of discipline and continuous improvement connects to that broader theme we saw across the sources. How do these successful leaders and builders stay sharp? How do they keep learning and growing?
It seems like a mix of things: learning from others, intense practice, using new tools, and deliberately pushing boundaries.
Absolutely. Learning from others is key, whether it's formally seeking mentors or informally, like the MFM guys reverse engineering, successful entrepreneurs like Brad Jacobs to figure out their methods. Harley mentioned how his law school experience shaped his thinking. Then there's the power of applied learning. The source mentioned Warren Buffett reading Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People when he was young. He didn't just read it, he made it his religion. He studied it, practiced the principles obsessively, reread it, even taught it. That's the difference between just gathering information, reading, nodding, forgetting, and actually developing wisdom by internalizing and applying knowledge until it becomes second nature.
I thought Harley's story about his colleague Diego and the scratch the itch binder was fascinating too.
Oh, yeah. That was such a cool, almost old-school example of deep learning in the digital age. This colleague apparently finds interesting articles and blog posts online, prints them out, physically marks them up with pens, highlights things, organizes them in a binder. Harley called it amazing brain food, a personal luxury. He likened Diego to a truffle pig, sniffing out these valuable nuggets of insight. Apparently, Harley even had a similar idea himself years ago for a curated physical newsletter in a binder. It just highlights that sometimes slowing down, engaging physically with information through curation and annotation can lead to much deeper understanding and retention than just endlessly scrolling feeds.
But they're definitely not Luddites. They're also clearly embracing cutting-edge tools, especially AI, for analysis and workflow.
For sure. Harley gave examples of using AI personally, using ChatGPT to analyze or to help structure ideas and get feedback on speeches. He mentioned preferring Claude for analyzing really long documents like real estate reports, saying it excels there. And at Shopify, they've made a big effort to make their massive internal data legible to AI. They built this internal vault that leaders like Harley can query to instantly pull up data for earnings calls or strategic planning. Though he did note the trade-off. AI is incredibly fast for pulling data, but it might lack the human nuance, the strategic intuition, the why behind the numbers that an experienced leader provides. It's a perfect example of AI reflexivity, the tool changing how you think and work.
And that theme of pushing personal limits came up too as a driver for growth.
Yeah, Harley talked about doing that intense 29029 challenge where you hike up and down a mountain repeatedly until you've climbed a vertical equivalent of Mount Everest. He does it annually, he said, not just for the physical feat, but because the fear of failing the challenge is what actually motivates him to train consistently throughout the year, actively seeking out things that scare you, leaning into discomfort, whether it's physical like that challenge or maybe public speaking, or tackling a complex new project that's consistently framed as a powerful catalyst for growth.
It really feels like this journey, mastering the fundamentals, finding opportunities, building with purpose, constantly learning and pushing yourself, it never really stops, does it?
Seems not. Hormozi had that great point about the myth of the magic number. The idea many entrepreneurs have that if they just reach X million dollars, all their problems will vanish. He basically called it bullshit. Success doesn't end challenges. It just brings different, often bigger ones. And yet, despite the immense scale and success, someone like Harley Finkelstein was noted for having a high approachability to market cap ratio. Still relatable, still grounded, even running a multi-billion-dollar company. That anecdote about a listener named Sam buying Shopify stock after hearing Harley talk and feeling the potential, That's a nice closing loop on how these ideas spread.
It really does all connect back from the core math to finding weird niches to being fueled by a mission to the relentless, lifelong pursuit of getting better as a leader, a builder, and just a person.
So we've covered a lot of ground today, from the nitty-gritty economics of LTV.CAC to surprising trends in guts and butts,
Well, let's not forget those.
to the profound power of a mission like the Orange Pill and the ongoing journey of building great companies and growing personally.
So as we wrap up, maybe the question for you, the listener, is this. We've explored all these complex ideas from different sources. What's one seemingly complex idea you heard today that you could actually simplify and start applying, even in a small way?
Or what unexpected trend might you be overlooking in your own field, your own environment, that could hold a hidden opportunity, maybe an auxiliary business?
And finally, what piece of discomfort, maybe something you've been avoiding, could you lean into just a little bit this week to push your own growth forward? Definitely some things to think about. Don't forget to subscribe to the Snippet Labs YouTube channel.
And follow us over on Twitter at Snippet Labs for daily insights and updates.
Ideas ignite empires. Pay attention to the sparks.